All right, man, peace. So, brothers, I found this very interesting segment on the CBS Morning News pertaining to a pair of so-called Native American young men who were on a college campus tour at Colorado State University. Please keep in mind that the mascot for Colorado State University is the Rams. Why do I bring that up? Because a few months ago I made a couple of videos pertaining to the Lupercalia, or as is conventionally called today, St. Valentine's Day. Why is that? Because in the first video that I made, I informed brothers that the Lupercalia is a day of sacrifice, human sacrifice, and is meant to venerate the god of this current kingdom, this current society, that being Pan. For those of you who don't know, when you read the book of Revelation, the 13th chapter and the 12th verse, and it tells you about the beast that rose up out of the earth with two horns like a lamb, it's in reference to the ancient god of Kemet known as Khnum, or Bnebdjeset, also known as Pan. He was always represented as having the goat horns or the lamb horns. Okay? That's why I always bring this entity up on this channel, so that a lot of you brothers who read the scriptures and are interested in the Bible can get a firmer grasp of the other side of things. And I'm going to be citing certain scriptures throughout this video so that brothers have a greater understanding of what the Most High was prohibiting. I'm bringing all this up because I've also told you, brothers, that when you watch these segments on the CBS Morning News or any telecast, don't just pay attention to the storyline, pay attention to the scenery, because they're going to reveal a lot within the scenery, within the background. That's why I stated in another video that these broadcasts have supraliminal programming or conditioning, as well as subliminal programming or conditioning. Once again, supraliminal programming are messages that are overt. Subliminal conditioning or programming are messages that are meant to permeate into your subconscious mind. In the second video that I did on the Lupercalia / Valentine's Day, I put on notice during the video to brothers that they very strategically staged many of the scenes in that segment on the CBS Morning News to highlight the ram's head in the background. They made sure that the ram's head was in the middle of the two people who were speaking about the topic at hand. I believe in that video they were speaking about greeting cards for Valentine's Day. There was another scene where the female reporter was interviewing an older gentleman. They were both sitting in chairs, and they made sure that right in the middle of them was a giant postcard with the owl. The ram's head and the owl are always used to represent the pagan father god and the pagan mother goddess. Okay? The owl is for the mother goddess. The ram's head or the goat's head is for the pagan mother god. Why am I saying all this over a storyline about two young Native American men who allegedly were the victims of racial profiling at Colorado State University? It's because it's very clear to me that if this whole storyline was not a setup, it's going to be used as a pretext to eventually down the line bring a certain amount of fame to the two so-called Native American men in question. Why do I say that? Because it was very obvious to me as I watched this segment that they're both witches, and that they're both into heavy metal, and that they're trying to gain fame in the music world by showing their subservience to Lucifer and Satan. And there is a major difference between the two. Luciferianism is the knowledge of Satan. Satan is that spirit of the adversary that is used to bring forth the Most High's will on the left-hand side. But that's a whole other video for another day. When you research the music industry, you'll come to understand that all of the high-profile entertainment acts either came into the industry as witches or became witches after they signed the contract. All you have to do is look up musical groups like Bone Thugs and Harmony, and they'll tell you how they used the Ouija board to guide them out to LA and assist them in being introduced to Eazy-E. Many of these people who are trying to gain great acclaim in the music world or the entertainment industry, they pray to Satan. They perform acts of satanic ritualism or Luciferianism, sacrifices, etc. And they pledge themselves over to that adversarial force, and that adversarial force will guide them into prominence in this world. And it's very clear to me that that is what these two young Native American men were doing, allegedly. But as we watch this segment, I'm going to prove my point based off of how they present this segment. So anyway, they're going to talk about it. I'm going to chime in.
The mother of two Native American teenagers removed from a college tour by campus police says her sons are the victims of racial profiling. Thomas and Lloyd Gray were visiting
Now, first off, look at how Thomas and Lloyd Gray are dressed. As I tell you brothers all the time, when you see these people wearing all black, it's for witchcraft. They're venerators of Asar/Pan. Pan, aka the Baphomet, is the god of this kingdom. He's the god of the entertainment industry. He's the god of so-called quote-unquote Satanism, which actually is Luciferianism. And they're going to show you in this segment who these two so-called Native American young males actually are venerating. And I believe that this whole storyline is going to be used as a pretext to grant them greater fame later on in the entertainment industry.
In Colorado State University last week when officers pulled them aside and searched them.
Now look at the so-called Native American man in the middle. That's the image of some type of demon.
A woman in their tour group had called 911 because she thought the young men were acting suspiciously.
Now, the female in the tour group who called 911 on these two young males, these two young Native American males, so-called Native American males, she may have been onto something. She may be an actress. She may just be a person that the spirit of Satan put the spirit on to alert the authorities to bring attention to this issue so that they could gain greater acclaim and greater fame. All these stories that are occurring all across America, and this makes the national news, that two so-called Native American males had the campus police called on them. Seems very strange.
Sharika Duncan shows us how the university is responding. Sharika.
Now look at how Sharika Duncan is dressed. Please keep in mind that we're still in early May. So right now in the craft, they're venerating the Oak King, and I'll be touching on this in another video. As we build up to May 1st, or now past May 1st, what they call May Day, that's in veneration of the Oak King. That's why you have the maypole, which is just a phallic symbol. That's in honor of Pan, the woodland god, or Cernunnos. He was also known as the Oak King. If you guys have heard about this story, the president of France, Emmanuel Macron, came to the White House and he attempted to plant a ceremonial oak tree on the White House lawn with President Donald Trump as an alleged act of goodwill. That was not an alleged act of goodwill. What that actually was an attempt to venerate the god of this world, that being the Oak King, Cush, aka Cernunnos, the woodland god, or as he's more properly known in ancient Greece, Pan. That is who they're sacrificing to, these blood sacrifices. He was also known in the Semitic world as Baal. He was known in ancient Babylon as Bel, Bel the Confounder. He's more conventionally known in the Bible as Cush. He was the person who set up the Babylonian mystery school system and passed it down to his son Nimrod. Cush was the brains, Nimrod was the brawn. Okay? But please pay attention to how they're color coordinating this feature. Her outfit is going to exactly match the color scheme for the Colorado State University Rams. That's why I noted that this whole situation occurred at Colorado State University and their mascot is the Ram.
Sharika, good morning.
Good morning. CSU officials say they are troubled and angered that the brothers were made to feel unwelcome.
Now, do you see how they've juxtaposed the Colorado State University emblem of the Ram right next to Miss Sharika Duncan? All of these mainstream so-called reporters and newscasters are either MK assets or in the craft. They have to be indoctrinated into the craft in order to make it to the big time.
In the interest of transparency, they released the 911 call and police body cam footage, but blurred the young men's faces to protect their privacy.
Hands up. Yeah, actually, we're just going to check your pockets real quick.
Thomas and Lloyd Gray say Colorado State University police made them feel like suspects, even though they did nothing wrong during their campus tour.
Let me say this very quickly. For those of you who've seen the film, the Marvel Cinematic Universe movie, Thor Ragnarok, which came out last year, there was a scene early in that film where Thor and his brother Loki, they teleport to Earth and Loki's dressed in all black. And Loki asks Thor, and I'm paraphrasing right now, he's saying, "I'm not a witch." And Thor looks at him and says, "Well, why are you dressed like one?" Loki had on an all black suit, black shirt, black tie, black blazer, black slacks. Thor looked at him and said, "Why are you dressed like a witch?" As I've told you brothers in previous videos, the mythological planet of Asgard actually represents Saturn. Thor and Loki are both different aspects of Nimrod. That's what they are. You also have the Rainbow Bridge, which is meant to symbolize the pathway between the physical world and the spiritual world. Remember the film Wizard of Oz, when Dorothy would sing Somewhere Over the Rainbow, where the rainbow would lead from Kansas to Oz, that spiritual realm? Remember the film E.T., which I've mentioned on this channel before? E.T. represents Pan, the woodland god. That's why he led about those boys. They represent the lost boys like Peter Pan. And when E.T. left, when his spaceship took off, it left a rainbow trail. Remember that? Because it's all talking about the same symbolic mythology. It's talking about the Luciferian principles that they adhere to.
What's in there? Anything in here? Just your money?
A mother on the tour group reported the young men to campus police, saying they were dressed in black and were quiet and evasive when she tried to ask them questions.
It's very interesting that the mother's antennas were raised because those two so-called Native American boys were dressed in black. But just to show you what the stereotype of a so-called school shooter is, watch what the police dispatcher asked the woman.
If it's nothing, I'm sorry, but it actually made me feel sick. And I've never felt like that. Are they white males?
Now look, even the dispatcher asked them, are they white males? There was a time when every person who called up the police department stated that I was robbed or I was beat down by a big black guy. Now when the description is that there are certain males that seem like a threat in regard to homeland terrorism and shooting up a school, the first question that's asked is, are they white males? Ain't that a bitch?
I think they're Hispanic. I believe one of them for sure. He said he's from Mexico.
Now the caller stated that she thinks that they're Hispanic. One of them for sure because he said he's from Mexico. Well, actually they're from New Mexico, and actually they're so-called Native American. So-called.
The brothers are musicians and members of the Mohawk tribe.
Now listen to what they stated. They stated that the brothers are both musicians. I believe that they've both been doing rituals to Satan to try to gain some type of acclaim in the rock and roll / heavy metal world. And this is how he's answering them.
They drove about 7 hours from their home in New Mexico to take the tour. Officers let the 17 and 19-year-olds go only after they showed an email confirming their tour schedule.
Good. All right. Get out of here. Sorry to take away from your guys' group.
The way that they were talking to Lloyd, it could have pretty much escalated quickly.
Thomas and his younger brother.
Now, guys, I want you to pay very close attention to how they frame this scene. Pay extremely close attention, especially to the older brother with the black t-shirt on. Look at how stiff he's walking. It's obvious to me that the entire family was coached. They were prompted that they're going to walk to do what they're about to do. Pay attention to everything in this scene. But look at how staged this entire scene looks, especially how the oldest son is walking. He's walking very stiff. And I'm going to read what it states on the back of his t-shirt because you may not be able to make it out. I'm going to rewind it back a little bit.
Younger brother.
The way that they were talking to Lloyd, it could have pretty much escalated quickly.
Thomas and his younger brother Lloyd both say they are now hesitant to return to the CSU camp.
Now look at what it states on the back of the older brother's shirt. It says, "Here they come, the ones who will destroy the earth." Now, why would he be wearing a t-shirt like that? Please understand that everything that's done, everything that's worn in many of these segments is prompted. That's why I stated in the video that I did on the shootings at the Marjory Stoneman Douglas High School, there was a scene where the reporter basically prompted the young girl to state that instead of the eagle, their emblem should be the phoenix. Why is that? Because Heru represents that god of sacrifice. He represents that god of rebirth because he is supposedly the reincarnation of Asar, the god of death. Okay, so that entire situation was prompted. When I say that situation, I mean that question that the reporter asked that young girl in the video when she was interviewing the young lady from Marjory Stoneman Douglas. It's very obvious to me that this entire story has been set up as an answer to the prayers of these two young boys here who are trying to achieve fame by any means necessary, especially the older one. He, to me, is the clear ringleader. Now watch what they're going to show them doing.
Campus. CSU's president said.
Now you see how they focused in on the emblem of the ram's head?
In a statement, there is no place for hate at Colorado State University, and we will not be silent when we see it.
I felt like...
Now look at this. It's showing them feeding goats. What does this have to do with what occurred at Colorado State University? Why are they showing them feeding goats? The reason why they're doing this is because this is supposed to symbolize the fact that they're showing their obeisance to the god of the entertainment industry, Pan. And this is imagery that is oftentimes used in the music world, especially going back to the 60s and 70s with groups like the Beatles, the Beach Boys, etc. I'll probably do an epilogue about this fact after this video.
They treated my boys like garbage.
Despite her anger,
You see how they're focusing in on the goats?
Lorraine Gray says she's glad the situation did not end worse for her sons.
I'm one of the lucky mothers who still has experienced something like this with law enforcement and still have my boys alive. And there was no reason for suspicion except for this 911 caller's bias.
Well, I think that the 911 caller was either an actress, someone who had a certain sentiment whispered into her ear by a spirit, or a woman who just saw a couple of freaked out looking young boys and she's still spooked out about what she saw on television. Or hell, maybe all three. But without a doubt, she was moved to do something so that your boys could attain a certain level of acclaim, a certain level of fame. I have no doubt about that.
The university says from now on, no one on a campus tour will be questioned unless officers speak with the tour guide first. CSU also wants to reimburse Thomas and Lloyd for their expenses and bring them back to campus as VIPs. The brothers told us they're unsure if they'll accept that. Nora?
Of course, they don't have to accept it because they're probably about to sign to some type of major record deal.
Nora?
All right, Jerika, thank you.
All right, man, peace. So, brothers, as I believe I stated in the initial video that I did on this topic, I decided that I was going to create an epilogue for this video pertaining to the issue surrounding the two young so-called Native American males by the names of Thomas Gray and Lloyd Gray, two brothers of quote-unquote Native American heritage, allegedly, who claimed that they were the victims, quote-unquote, of racial profiling while on a college campus tour at Colorado State University. And as I stated explicitly in the video, please remember that the mascot for Colorado State University is the Ram. I believe the mascot's name is Cam the Ram. And as I always tell you, brothers, consistently and incessantly in my videos, especially when you're watching many of these newscasts, don't just pay attention to the narrative that they're putting forth. Pay attention to the scenery around the narrative. That's why I highlighted how the main newscaster who was reporting the story, the color in which she was dressed in, which was really an allusion to Beltane, the fertility holiday that was celebrating Cush, who is the ram god or the goat god, as well as the fact that they always had the picture of the mascot right adjacent to the story as it was going on, right adjacent to the newscaster as she was speaking about the allegations. And I noted while we were watching the video that I thought that it was very pertinent that they decided to show both Thomas and Lloyd Gray, as well as their mother, going over to feed goats. Really, it had nothing to do with the story that they were reporting, unless you know what you're watching. That's why I stated that it was obvious to me, as we were watching the newscast, the segment, that there was a reason why they were reporting that both Thomas Gray and Lloyd Gray were musicians. They were into heavy metal. Why is that? Because that's how they were trying to get into the industry. Before these quote-unquote artists, who are all witches, before they're able to gain their fame, they have to show their allegiance to the god of the entertainment industry, that being the goat god Pan. And there's a reason why the goat god has become synonymous with the image of Satan, because that's all Luciferianism is. It's a pathway, it's a doorway to Satanism. Now you have some Luciferians who don't consider themselves Satanists. And then you have some people who get straight to the point and they'll tell you that they're Satanists. They worship Satan, who is the adversarial energy that is presented for mankind. Satan is not the adversary to the Most High. And a lot of people don't understand that. The Most High has no peers. He has no adversaries. Satan is set up to be a deceiving spirit for the people here on the earth. That's it. Okay, and that might seem controversial for certain people, especially if you've been indoctrinated into the church system. But no, Satan is not an adversary of the Most High. But once again, I just wanted to point out, while we were going over that segment, that it was very notable to me that they depicted Thomas and Lloyd Gray, as well as their mother, feeding those goats as they were going over the story, because it was obvious that they wanted people to subliminally have that image of feeding the goat put into their heads, because those who are in the know, who are Luciferians in the entertainment industry, they know what that really means. That means that they're paying obeisance to the goat god. And if you understand the history of the entertainment industry, you'll know that many of these rappers, singers, musicians, athletes will strategically have themselves posted or posed next to a goat to show their allegiance. They can't tell you up front because they don't think that people are ready for that. But they'll do it in a very surreptitious way because they cannot be blatant with it. Okay? So that's what was going on. And that's why I stated while that segment was airing that the female who called 911 was either an actress or she was someone who was moved to do so because the spirit who they were trying to show their obeisance to moved that woman to do it as a pretext to them gaining an introduction into the limelight. That's why I said don't be surprised to see them come out with some type of album in the near future. And a movie that shows you that that's how many of these top flight entertainment acts, that's how they gain their fame, is a film that Megan Fox did about 10 years ago called Jennifer's Body. If I get a chance, I may do a review of that movie, or at least that scene, on my channel. Because they show you how all these top, especially these heavy metal bands and these hip hop acts also, they have to show their allegiance to Satan or Lucifer in order to get introduced into the entertainment industry. They have to do it. They come into the industry witches already. Okay? They're witches already. And the ones of them that are not full-fledged witches, they get pushed up the ladder as they're involved. The ones who are not willing to do certain things, they get cast aside. Remember, in the segment, I even told you, brothers, to pay attention to what was written on the back of the older brother's t-shirt. I believe it was something like, "These are the two who have come to destroy the earth." Something like that was written on the back of his t-shirt. It's very obvious that they're Satanists. I wouldn't even say that they're necessarily Luciferians, because to be a Luciferian, you have to go through different processes and understand the various gods and, how these gods can empower you. All these, they're just demons and spirits that people open up their bodies for to be used. But I just wanted to go through these photos very quickly to provide some context to what I was stating. Now, this first photo here is of the Beach Boys, a very legendary rock and roll band from the 60s. I shouldn't even call them a rock and roll band. They were more like an early pop band in the 60s who were known for their arrangements and their vocalizations. They were very harmonious in how they sang together. They were introduced into the industry by their father. They were signed to Capitol Records. They had a hit initial album, and I believe it was their second album or maybe their third album. They produced an album by the name of Pet Sounds. And at first, when they submitted the album, their record company, Capitol Records, didn't like it because the sound was a little different from the initial album. Their initial album was what we call today, or what was known even from back then, as surfer music. Even though they didn't even surf. The Beach Boys didn't even surf, but they were doing surfer music. They were like gangster rappers who never shot anybody. They were doing surfer music and didn't even surf. And, really a whole video should be done on the Beach Boys. I'll probably do one because they were Luciferians to the level where they even ended up sacrificing their drummer, one of the Wilson brothers. I believe his name was Dennis. He was sacrificed in the late 70s, early 80s, alleged drowning, but he was sacrificed. The Svengali of the group, Brian Wilson, the lead or the head of that group, he was the mastermind behind most of their songs. And he tried his best to introduced high-level Luciferianism into the group, but they didn't really take to it initially, even though most of them now are what they themselves call transcendentalist meditators. They're into communing with spirits now, the Beach Boys. Like I said, a whole video could be devoted to them. But point being is this: as you can see, they're feeding goats. The reason why they're feeding the goats is because when they brought forth that album, Pet Sounds, to their record company, Capitol Records didn't like what they were hearing, but what they told the Beach Boys is, we'll put out this album if you go to the zoo. I believe this is the San Diego Zoo, and you feed the goats there. And that's what they did. Why is that? Because Capitol Records was a witch coven. They needed the Beach Boys to show their obeisance to the goat god Pan, or as he's also known as Samael. He's also known as Azazel. And that's something that I also wanted to mention for many of you brothers who read the scriptures. When you read the scriptures, when it references a goat that is about to be put forth for an offering, especially a sin offering, it's referred to as Sa'ir, meaning shaggy. Now, that term is translated as goat when it's an animal that's about to be sacrificed. But it's also translated as devils when you read Leviticus 17:7. That same word for a goat that's about to be sacrificed is the same word that's translated as devils in Leviticus, I believe, 17:7. And then also in, I want to say 2 Chronicles, the 11th chapter. I think 11 and 15, but you brothers can look it up. When you go to Leviticus, the 16th chapter, and it tells you about the Day of Atonement and the processes that correspond with the Day of Atonement. How you have to have two goats, one goat for the sin offering and another goat that's going to be the scapegoat. The word for scapegoat in the Hebrew is Azazel. That's where the name for that demon comes from. Remember that Denzel Washington, he did a movie back in the day. I'm trying to remember the name of it. Oh, The Fallen. That was the name of it. Denzel did a movie back, I believe like 98 or 99, called The Fallen. And he was being pursued by the demon Azazel. Azazel is in reference to the scapegoat. That's the goat that carries all the sins of the people that's let out into the woods to wander. Okay? That's what the name Azazel literally means. It means a wandering goat. All right? Az is goat, you know, as it's alive. Now, a goat that's about to be sacrificed is known as a sha'ir. There's a constant congruence in the scriptures between the Edomites and goats, even to the point where when you go into Daniel 8:21, that term is used for the rough goat, talking about Alexander the Macedonian. Okay? But that's a whole other topic for another day, the Edomites and goats and so on and so forth. When you go into Isaiah, the 13th chapter, and I believe the 21st verse, and Isaiah 34:14, that same word, Sa'ir, is translated as satyrs, Satyrs. That's talking about what's known in mythology as fawns, meaning half men, half goats. Okay? But once again, when you read Leviticus 17:7, and I believe it's 2 Chronicles 11 and 15, but you brothers look it up. That word is translated as devils. And it tells Israel, the nation of Israel, not to go a-whoring, sacrificing unto devils. The word in the Hebrew is Sa'ir, meaning goats. So that goat deity existed from back then. And it was a deity, a false deity, that the nation of Israel had brought out with them from Egypt. You understand? Our people had learned about that in Egypt from the Kemetic people known conventionally as Egyptians. That's why I always harp on those fake deities, those false gods like Khnum, the goat-headed god, or the ram-headed god, but Nebdezhet, because it comes all the way down to today. Okay? But as you can see, the Beach Boys, they had to show their obeisance to Pan or Khnum, whatever you want to call that entity, right here. Now, this photo here, I remember this is one of the photos that I use for context in a video that I did a very long time ago pertaining to Kevin Hart, showing you that he also was a venerator of the GOAT God Pan. He had an episode of his show, Real House Husbands or Real Husbands of Hollywood, whatever the hell the name of that stupid ass show is, with him and Nick Cannon and those other guys, those other pansexuals on that show. And the episode of that show that I'm referring to, it was so crystal clear what he was communicating. He actually had to go back to high school in this episode, and the name of the high school was Morning Star High School. He had to go back because he had not finished high school. He had not gotten enough credits to get his quote-unquote degree, talking about he had not risen up to a high level enough in Luciferianism or Masonry to be considered a master. He had to go back to school, to Morning Star High School, and the mascot at Morning Star High School was this goat right here. I did a very intricate breakdown of that episode. YouTube pulled it down almost 15 minutes after I uploaded it. I tried to upload it somewhere else. They pulled it down from there. So it's very obvious that they were aware, that I was aware of what that episode was actually talking about. And once again, brothers, the word for a sacrificial goat, or a goat that's about to be sacrificed, the Hebrew word there is sa'ir. And that word is translated sometimes as goat, also sometimes as devils. Leviticus 17:7. I'm trying to remember the other scripture that it was in. I think it was either 2 Kings 11:15 or 2 Chronicles. I believe it's 2 Chronicles 11:15, where it's translated as devils. It's in reference to images that were made for the goat god even from back then. Because remember, the so-called goat god comes from ancient Kemet, the Babylonian Kemetic mystery school system. All a devil is a deceiver. That's what Cush was. Cush was a deceiver. He's the one who brought forth many of the rituals related to sex magic. He's the first great wizard or great sorcerer after the flood. Okay? I mean, you could probably say his father Ham was, but he was the true mastermind behind the system that we call today Masonry and Luciferianism and all these religions today, like the Pope and the Catholic Church. They're all just vicars for what Cush set up thousands of years ago. He was also the leader of the apostasy that became known as the Tower of Babel. Nimrod gets the credit for it, but it was truly Cush who was the great designer of that whole thing, that whole charade that was cast down, which led to mankind getting scattered and getting the languages diversified so that people could not understand one another anymore, so that they could not lead any type of quote-unquote rebellion or try to. But a lot of that's another video for another day. Point being is that Kevin Hart is a Luciferian. There's no doubt about that. Now, this was from the cover of a Pearl Jam album. As you can see, they're highlighting the sheep fighting through the fence. As I stated, the ram or the goat is used interchangeably for that god. If you ever research the ancient Kemetic god Amun-Ra, he's depicted with the ram's horns. The horns always represent power. Even the name Kronos, the Greek god of time, is depicted with horns. Okay? The name Kronos actually means horned one, because you would wear those horns on your head to signify that you were a leader. Like when you read the scriptures, Isaiah the 34th chapter, when it tells you about the bulls of Bashan, it's talking about leaders, great kings and leaders being cast down. Now, a lot of you brothers who grew up in the 90s, you remember this group, Black Sheep. This was their debut album. It says Black Sheep, a wolf in sheep's clothing. Let's look at this album cover, how it's designed. As you can see, you have the white and the black bringing together opposites, and of course the red sprinkled in. What does that mean? This signifies the Black Mass. Okay? Both of these cats were indoctrinated into the craft before they were able to get their album deal. I always bring up this album cover. When you go back, Michael Jackson, Blood on the Dance Floor, they show you the checkerboard floor, the black and white theme, and the red mixed in. They were ready to make sacrifices. Look at the name of the album. A wolf in sheep's clothing, meaning what? we're here to promote a certain agenda. You think that we're here for one thing, but we're really here for something far more insidious. As you can see, they're both dressed in all black. They are Saturnians. Simple as that. A lot of these guys, they'll do anything to get a little bit of fame. Things don't pop off how they would have liked, and they try to get out of it. This is why you hear about 25 years down the line, so-and-so, they had one hit album, a one hit song. They get found dead in their apartment. Nobody knows what the cause of death is. It doesn't matter. From the time that many of these artists signed their initial deal to agree to be indoctrinated into the craft, i.e. to become artists, musicians, etc., with these labels and these record companies, they're basically agreeing to also make themselves willing lambs for the slaughter when the time comes. So once again, down the road, after their careers have fizzled out, you hear about one or both of these men found in their apartments, dead. No reason is given for the cause of death. You know that was a sacrifice. Once you agree to anything, anything can happen. Now, this group here is very interesting. They're known as the Alan Parsons Project. I'll be covering them in a video that I'm going to be doing about an extremely famous athlete somewhere down the line. As you can see here on the cover of their album, Stereotomy, they have a depiction of a horned entity. Not too easy to make out who it is, but it's pretty easy to make out what it is if you understand who the god of the record industry is. This is the GOAT God right here. The Alan Parsons Project, this group, they unabashedly are Luciferians, sun worshippers, and adherents to a lot of the core tenets of the Kemetic Mystery School system. This here was a reggae artist from the 70s. As you can see on the cover of his album, he's forehead to forehead with the GOAT God. Name of the album is Ram Goat. Once again, we see him here feeding the sheep. That's why I stated to you brothers in that segment, that's why they had those two young men and their mother go to feed those goats. That's why they're doing that. It's to show that they're making an offering to the god of the entertainment industry, the GOAT God Pan. They're making an offering. That's what feeding the goat symbolizes. Once again, this cat here, he was a reggae artist from the 70s. And yes, worshiping the GOAT God is not just something for heavy metal artists or rock and roll artists. They've all been doing it for a very long time. Earth, Wind, and Fire, big Luciferians. That song, Shining Star, for you to see what your light can truly be, or what your life can truly be, pardon me. That's talking about the veneration of Saturn, as well as the veneration of the sun. Okay? Like that video that I did on Kobe Bryant, the Kobe system. Once they accept that philosophy, up, up, up goes their life in this world. Now look at this album cover right here. I'm not even quite sure who this artist is, quote unquote, because just looking at how he's dressed, it appears that he's come out relatively recently. He's holding a goat in his arms, and the name of the album is OMG. We know that OMG is an abbreviation for Oh My God. So the name of the album is Oh My God, and he's holding a goat in his arms. So obviously his God is the goat. Now this was another photo that was taken at the photo shoot for the Beach Boys that day. This was the lead producer for the Beach Boys. His name is Brian Wilson. He's viewed as being a genius in the music industry, especially for his production work on many of the Beach Boys albums. Once again, the Capitol Records music group told the Beach Boys to go engage in a photo shoot with the goats at the San Diego Zoo before they would put out the album Pet Sounds. This is a relatively famous modern rock group known as The Killers. Now look at this. They have the female there to the right. They have the ram, the bottom left. And the name of the album is Sam's Town. Now we see the same theme as we saw in the Black Sheep album cover, same theme. But about 15 years later, because I believe the Black Sheep album came out in like 91, 92, somewhere around there, probably like 92. And this album came out, I believe, in 06. But same theme, black and white and red. Why is that? Because they're showing that they're willing to make a blood sacrifice, or they already have. That's why they're getting their fame. Once again, this was depicted very graphically in the film Jennifer's Body, starring Megan Fox, for you brothers who have never seen that movie. Now pay very close attention. We have the ram depicted in this album cover, and the name of the album is Sam's Town. Now, who is Sam? The name Sam is an abbreviation of the name Samael, Samael, the goat god, or one of the names for the goat god. And I mentioned this in other videos. This is where we get the character of Uncle Sam from. Uncle Sam, who basically is the mascot for America, is the goat god. That's why he's depicted with the goatee. And what does he always say? I want you. When you go and you fight in the U.S. military, that's who you're fighting for. You're fighting for the goat god. Because that is the god of America and has been since its inception, because all the founding fathers were Luciferians. All of them. So-called founding fathers. Thomas Jefferson, George Washington, John Adams, Benjamin Franklin. Did a video about Benjamin Franklin a while ago, about his statements coming against the quote-unquote black Germans. He was a Luciferian. They found that he had the bones, the skeletons, of something like 15 people adjacent to his house, buried underground. Allegedly, he was performing medical experiments. Bullshit. That man was a serial killer. Allegedly. But that's neither here nor there. Once again, just pay attention to the album cover. Same color scheme as we saw on the Black Sheep album cover. Black, white, and red. For the Black Mass. Black Mass initiation. That means blood sacrifice. Bringing together of opposites and the blood sacrifice. This was an album cover from Rolling Stone. I believe it was called Goat's Head Soup. This was once again them showing their allegiance. Mick Jagger and Keith Richards and a lot of those guys from the late 60s, early 70s, they don't even try to hide it. They'll tell you point blank that they follow Aleister Crowley. Aleister Crowley, probably the number one witch / warlock of the 20th century, as well as a relatively famous director named Kenneth Anger. One of Kenneth Anger's best friends is Bono from U2. You know, the guy who allegedly is this big humanitarian. Brothers, you guys are going to find out that all these Caucasian humanitarians, these famous actors and singers, they're all Luciferians, man. They're trying to get you to send them their money so that they can use that money to line their own pockets, and also to create new diseases to spread to all these so-called quote-unquote third world countries, which really is just a coded way of saying countries that are presided over by people of color. That's it. Places like India and all these countries in Africa, the reason why they have the highest rate of AIDS is because they're purposefully being given the AIDS and the HIV. That's what the Center for Disease Control is all about. They create new diseases there, and they try to figure out how they're going to spread them. All this that I'm saying right now is alleged, okay? It's all alleged. Oh, this is your boy Paul McCartney. This was an album that he did in the early 70s called Ram. As you can see, he has the ram by the horns. He's having it face the camera. This album came out a little bit after the Beach Boys came out with Pet Sounds. So basically, all these groups in the late 60s, early 70s were trying to one-up one another because they were all followers of Thelema, Aleister Crowley's spiritual system that was supposed to help you get closer to Heru. Right? And that's all Aleister Crowley did. He took various aspects of different esoteric systems and he made a composite system. And that really is the religion of the entertainment industry, as well as components from other spiritual systems. But basically, it revolves around Thelema. Most of your top athletes are Thelemites, like Kobe Bryant, Thelema. That's why he stated point blank in the video that I did. He stated, be like Harpo. Okay? That's what he meant. And once again, we're looking here at Paul McCartney, and many people say that this is not the real Paul McCartney, that the original Paul McCartney was killed back in the early 60s. Look, I mean, I really don't care. It is what it is. Point being is this. He's following after the goat/ram god Khnum, Khnum. It's the same entity that was forbidden in Leviticus 17:7, 2 Chronicles 11:15, etc. Okay? Called devils. Oh, this is a group known as the Fleet Foxes. They had a photo session where they went to go feed goats as well. They tried to act as if they were doing it in homage to the Beach Boys, but clearly it was to show their obeisance to the goat god, to try to raise their prospects of becoming a high-level band, a world-famous band. Brothers, once again, in the entertainment industry, the only way that you get to the elite level is to become a Saturnian, a venerator of Saturn, the goat god, the mother goddess. That's it, man. Okay? So once again, that's what that video was about. I believe that those two quote-unquote Native American brothers had been praying, had been holding rituals for Satan or Lucifer or whatever their spiritual bent is, and he finally answered their prayers through this whole charade of alleged racial profiling at that college. And do not be surprised to see that they get some type of record deal or record contract very soon. All right? So peace.